Welcome, science friends, to Evidence of Evolution. Now, there is evidence for evolution, and we can remember all of the main four categories by this acronym FAME, F-A-M-E. We're going to look at fossil evidence, anatomical structures, molecular evidence, and embryological evidence. So first up, fossils. Fossils can tell us lots and lots of different things about organisms who lived in the past. We can tell what kind they are, how they changed over time, what they ate, how they moved, maybe even what the climate was like, especially when we look at their food. So here we see some fossils of an ancient horse. We're looking at teeth and foot bones. From left to right, we're going oldest to most present. And as you can see, these ancient horses had very small, tiny teeth, and over time we see those teeth get larger and larger, both lengthwise and widthwise, and that's because their food changed over time. More current horses eat more plants. They are herbivores, so they need larger teeth to crush and grind their food. We're also going to look at the forefeet, or the front limbs of horses. The middle section here is sort of a front look at the feet, and the bottom section is the sort of side angle, and we can see how these ancient horses' feet have changed over time. Believe it or not, horses used to have 4 toes, and over time they used their outside toes less and less until eventually, like our current horses, we have 1 toe. So horses have a regular arm that comes down, but instead of having a spread of toes or fingers, depending on if it's the forelimbs or the hind limbs, we see that all the other toes have disappeared. So horses are just walking around on 1 toe for each of their legs. Kind of crazy. Looking at rock strata, or the layers of rock, we can tell how old some of these fossils are. So the farther down those fossils go, the older they are. So as time goes on, rock and dirt and soil and all of these things layer on top of each other. So the things at the top are the youngest, and as you dig down deep into the Earth's crust, they get older and older and older. So depending on where you find a fossil, you might be looking at a younger or older fossil. So the deeper we dig, the farther back in time we go. Number 2, anatomical evidence. So we're looking at homologous structures, that vocab word we keep seeing over and over again. Homologous, homo means same, logos means information. So we're looking at structures that have the same things in them. Let's take a look at these 4 examples of mammals. We have a human, a cat, a whale, and a bat, all of their sort of arm bones and hand bones. And we can see that all 4 of these mammals do have a common ancestor based on their anatomical or body structures. All 4 of these very different organisms have the same arm bones. So they have the top bone, a humerus. They have the forearm bones, a radius and an ulna. They all have wrist bones and finger bones, or phalanges. Even though they are very different organisms and they use those limbs for different reasons, we can tell that they are related. They have that common ancestor because of these anatomical structures. They all have the same bones. Now, even though they have the same bones, it doesn't mean that they're going to use those limbs for the same reason. For humans, we use our forelimbs, our arms, and our hands to grab things and hold things. An animal like a cat uses them for walking and running. An aquatic animal like a whale, or maybe even a dolphin, they use theirs for swimming, so it's more of a fin structure. And finally, the bat here, it uses its arms to help it fly. If you notice, even though all of those bones are the same, they're different shapes and lengths based on how that animal uses their forearms. So humans, all of our bones are arranged differently than cat bones, whale bones, and bat bones because we use our arms for a different reason. So they need a different structure. Which brings us to another structure called a vestigial structure. These are things that have little or no function. Believe it or not, whales have a pelvis or hip bone and femurs. So that's the biggest leg bone in humans, the one that connects to the hip. It's our thigh bone. And whales don't have legs. So why would they have a hip bone and a leg bone if they don't have legs? Well, this is evidence that they evolved from land-dwelling creatures. They came from some mammals that were on land, and eventually, over time, they became more and more aquatic and lost those limbs because they didn't have a need for them. There are many other examples in humans. We have a vestigial structure called an appendix. An appendix is important to other animals and other mammals. It's part of the immune system, but in humans, we don't really need it. We have other means of protecting our body. So if somebody gets appendicitis, we can just take it out and that human can keep on living their life with no problem. So it's an example that we are related to other mammals, even if we don't need it anymore. A common misconception is something called an analogous structure. This is not evidence for evolution. So for example, we have winged animals, we have insects, a flying dinosaur called a pterosaur, a bird, and a bat. So all of these animals have the same function of their limb, but they are made up of different structures. So this is the opposite of homologous structures. An insect wing has no bones at all. A pterosaur wing, or a flying dinosaur, they just have one really long bone going all the way down their arm. Birds have two similar structures in their upper arm and forearm, but after that they don't really have wrist bones or fingers or anything like that. And then of course the bat has the same structure as we do because bats are mammals. So these are very different animals who do not have a common ancestor, even though their structures are used for the same purpose of flying. Our third point of evidence is molecular evidence. We can do things like compare biological molecules like DNA, amino acids, different organelles in our cells, like mitochondria, which have their own DNA as well. So we can look at, let's say, amino acids and the sequence of amino acids in certain proteins. In this example, we're looking at humans, horses, gorillas, chimpanzees, and zebras. All of these are mammals, but again, we are very different species. And looking at the sequence of these amino acids, we can tell who is more related to others. So for example, humans and horses, we don't have a whole lot in common. We have one amino acid, histidine, that's in common in the same place, indicating that we are fairly different. However, humans, gorillas, and chimpanzees have 3 of these 4 amino acids in common, same order, the lysine, glutamine, and histidine, all in order. And even the chimpanzee has the 4th one in common with us, the isoleucine, so we are most related to chimpanzees. Also, if you compare the horses and zebras, they have only one difference. They are fairly closely related. So looking at things like amino acids and DNA sequences, we can compare those molecules and see if we have more in common, we're more closely related. If there's less in common, they are more distantly related. Our last piece of evidence here is called embryology. We're going to look at embryos, or very early stages of development in an organism. So embryos of many different organisms look very similar to each other. In this example here, we're comparing a chicken with a human. One is a bird, one is a mammal. But in this super duper early stage of development, they look fairly similar. They have a lot of the same features. They're generally the same shape, they both have eyes, they have little pouches, they have tails. Yes, we did have tails at some point in our development. And as that embryo and fetus start to develop more and more, we lose some of those similarities. But again, the fact that we look really similar to a bird in the earliest stages of development shows us that there at some point was a common ancestor between us and chickens. So in these early stages, all vertebrates or animals with backbones look very similar. We have backbones, chickens have backbones, snakes have backbones. We see similar patterns in the tissues and the organs, and obviously that spine if it's a vertebrate. So they also generally develop in the same order. So we develop these organs at the same time, usually the most important organs like hearts and lungs and livers and all of that stuff. It's not just random. So we develop in a similar way, and then as we develop more and more, later stages, we get more and more of those differences. That was evidence for evolution. I hope it helped.